The sun burned bright over the Arizona desert, spreading golden red light across the endless sand. The wind carried the sound of dry grass brushing against the rocks, and the only sign of life was a lone rider making his way through the dust. His name was Tom Branson, a quiet man who worked as a ranch hand for old Mr. Douglas, one of the biggest landowners near Red Mesa town. Tom was not the kind of man who looked for trouble. He worked hard, minded his own business, and kept away from town gossip. But life around the border wasn't peaceful in those days. There were endless stories about Apache tribes moving through the land, sometimes trading, sometimes protecting what little they had left after years of hardship. The settlers often feared them, though many had never even met one. That afternoon, Tom was checking the water lines near the creek that ran along the edge of the ranch. The cattle had been restless lately, and someone said a few went missing. So Tom rode out early, hoping to find the cause. As he got closer to the water, he saw something move near the tall rocks. A quick flash of brown and red. His horse snorted softly. Tom's first thought was that it might be a coyote or worse, someone trying to steal from the ranch. He carefully got off his horse and crouched low, walking closer. The heat shimmered in the air and his heart beat a little faster. Then behind the rocks he saw her, a young Apache girl, maybe 16 or 17, kneeling beside the creek, filling a small clay pot with water. She was barefoot, her clothes torn from travel, her long dark hair tangled by the wind. Tom froze. The girl looked up suddenly, her eyes wide with fear and surprise. For a moment, neither moved. She looked like she was ready to run, but Tom, acting out of instinct and confusion, stepped forward and said, "Wait, don't move." He didn't mean to sound harsh, but his voice echoed off the rocks. The girl gasped, dropped her pot, and backed away. Tom lifted his hands, trying to calm her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quickly. But she couldn't understand his words. Thinking she might be dangerous, or that others might be hiding nearby, Tom did something he would regret deeply later. He reached for his rope and gently caught her by the wrist, just to stop her from running. She tried to pull away, but she was weak and trembling. "It's all right," he said again softly, though he knew she couldn't understand. When he brought her back to the ranch, a few workers came running. "You caught one?" one of them said in surprise. Tom shook his head. "No, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just getting water." But the news spread fast. By evening, the whole town of Red Mesa had heard that a ranch hand had caught an Apache girl near the creek. Some people came to see her out of curiosity. Others whispered with suspicion. The sheriff came too, with his usual serious face. He asked Tom many questions. Where he found her, what she was doing, if there were others nearby. Tom answered honestly, but the sheriff still looked uneasy. "She can't stay here," the sheriff said. "We'll have to send her to the camp in Fort Baxter." Tom looked at the girl sitting quietly near the barn. She hadn't spoken a single word since she arrived. Her eyes stayed on the ground, her hands folded tightly together. Something about her silence made Tom feel uneasy. Not about her, but about himself. He felt as if he had done something wrong without realizing it. "Sheriff," Tom said slowly, "she's just a girl. Maybe she got lost. Let me keep her here for a while, at least until we find out where she came from." The sheriff frowned. "That's not how things are done. Please," Tom said firmly. "She's scared. Sending her away right now won't help anyone." After a long pause, the sheriff finally agreed, but only for a few days. "Fine," he said. "But she's your responsibility." So the girl stayed. The next few days were strange for everyone. The other ranch hands didn't know how to act around her. Some avoided her completely. Others whispered things when she passed by. But Tom noticed that she never complained or caused any trouble. She woke up early, helped clean the barn, and even tried to feed the horses. When Tom brought her food, she accepted it politely but still didn't speak. He tried to ask her name a few times, pointing to himself and saying, "Tom." Finally, after a few tries, she pointed to her chest and said softly, "Nayeli." It was the first time she had spoken, and her voice was gentle and calm after that. Things began to change. Nayeli started to smile sometimes, just small, shy smiles, especially when she watched the children who came to the ranch with their parents. She would show them how to braid grass or draw shapes in the sand. One afternoon, Tom found her humming a quiet tune while mending a broken saddle strap. Her hands moved quickly and skillfully. He realized she was not a helpless girl at all. She was strong, brave, and wise in ways he couldn't understand. Every day, Tom's guilt grew heavier. He remembered how afraid she had looked that first day by the creek. He wished he could take that moment back. One evening, as the sun was setting, Tom found Nellie standing near the fence watching the horizon. The sky was painted orange and pink. He walked over slowly. "You miss your home?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away, but after a moment she pointed toward the distant mountains. Then she touched her heart. Tom understood. "Yes," he said quietly. "I know what it's like to miss home." That night, while Tom sat near the fire, he thought about everything that had happened. He hadn't meant to capture anyone. He had just been afraid of what he didn't understand. Now he realized that fear had made him blind. A few days later, some men in town started complaining that Nayeli shouldn't be allowed to stay. They said it wasn't safe, that her people might come looking for her. Tom tried to calm them down, but the talk grew louder each day. One morning, the sheriff came back to the ranch. "Time's up, Tom," he said kindly. "Orders from above. The girl must go to Fort Baxter." Tom felt his stomach twist. He walked to the barn where Nayeli was feeding a horse. She turned to him as if she already knew. Her eyes were calm but sad. He didn't know what to say. He simply nodded and said, "I'm sorry." That night, Tom couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside and something felt wrong. He went out to the barn only to find it empty. Nayeli was gone. On the ground near the stall where she used to sleep lay his old hat, and tucked inside the band was a single feather. Tom stood there for a long time, staring at it. He didn't know what it meant. Maybe a thank you, maybe a goodbye, or maybe a promise that she would be all right. But he felt a strange peace inside him, mixed with sadness and wonder. The next morning, word spread quickly through town. "The Apache girl is gone." Some people thought she had escaped to bring her tribe back. Others whispered that she had disappeared into the mountains forever, but Tom said nothing. He only looked toward the horizon, remembering the girl who came to the ranch by accident and changed something deep within him. As the sun rose again over Red Mesa, Tom put the feather in his coat pocket, a small reminder of the day he learned that sometimes what we fear the most might be the very thing that teaches us kindness. Days passed after Nayeli's disappearance, but her presence still lingered everywhere around the ranch. The small clay pot she once used sat near the barn. The children from town sometimes came asking if she would ever come back. Tom had no answer. He only said softly, "Maybe one day." The town of Red Mesa had become tense again. Some people whispered that the Apache girl might return with others, but Tom never believed that. Deep inside, he felt Nayeli was not someone who would harm anyone. She had too kind a heart. Still, worry hung in the air like dust after a storm. Tom tried to go back to his daily work, but nothing felt the same. Every time he passed the creek, he remembered that first moment, the look of fear in her eyes, and the quiet courage she later showed. He often rode toward the mountains at sunset, half hoping to see her walking along the ridge, but she never appeared. Then, one evening, about 2 weeks later, the whole town was thrown into panic. The sheriff's little boy, Eddie, had gone missing. He had been playing with his dog near the edge of the desert, but by sundown neither had come back. The sheriff and half the townsfolk went out searching with lanterns and horses. Tom joined them immediately. They searched all night. The wind was dry and cold, carrying the smell of sand and cactus flowers. By morning, everyone was exhausted. The sheriff's wife sat on the steps of her house crying quietly, while the sheriff looked lost and broken. For the next 2 days, there was still no sign of the boy. Hope began to fade. People whispered prayers. Even the children stopped playing outside. On the third evening, just as the sun began to sink behind the red cliffs, a shadow appeared at the edge of town. At first, no one noticed. Then someone shouted, "There's someone coming!" All eyes turned. A figure was walking slowly toward them through the dust. As it came closer, people gasped. It was Nayeli, her hair tangled, her clothes torn, her skin sunburned, but her eyes steady and calm. And in her arms, she carried a small boy, Eddie, the sheriff's son. A deep silence fell over the crowd. No one moved. The sheriff stood frozen for a second, then ran forward. Nayeli's legs trembled, and just before she reached him, she nearly fell. Tom caught her just in time. "She found him," Tom said, his voice breaking. The sheriff gently took his son. The boy opened his eyes weakly and whispered, "Water." The crowd gasped again. Nayeli had carried him for miles through the blazing heat. Her lips were dry and she could barely stand. The sheriff looked at her, speechless. His eyes filled with tears. "You saved my boy," he said in a shaky voice. Nayeli smiled faintly, then closed her eyes and collapsed. Tom carried her inside the sheriff's house while the town doctor was called. For hours, people waited outside, whispering and praying. Finally, the doctor came out and said, "She's resting. She'll be fine." The sheriff came out next, holding his son's hand. His voice was full of emotion when he said, "This girl saved my child. She risked her life for him. From now on, no one in this town will speak ill of her." The people stood silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. Shame filled the air more than surprise. They had once judged her for being different. Now she had shown them what true courage looked like. Tom stayed by her side that night, sitting quietly near the chair where she rested. When she woke up in the middle of the night, she looked at him weakly and said, "Eddie, safe?" Tom smiled. "Yes," he said softly. "He's safe. You saved him." Nayeli smiled too, then turned her head toward the window. The moonlight fell on her face, calm and peaceful. Over the next few days, Nayeli slowly regained her strength. The sheriff's wife brought her food and fresh clothes. The children from town came to see her, bringing little gifts, flowers, ribbons, even drawings. They were no longer afraid of her. In fact, they adored her. One afternoon, the sheriff himself came to the ranch to speak with Tom. "She doesn't have anywhere to go," he said quietly. "If you're willing, maybe she can stay here in Red Mesa. The mission school needs someone who can help with the children, especially those from the nearby tribes." Tom agreed without hesitation. "Of course," he said. "She belongs here more than any of us." And so, Nayeli began a new chapter of her life. The mission school sat at the edge of town, near the same creek where Tom had first found her. There, she taught children from both Apache and settler families. She showed them how to speak a few words from each other's languages and told simple stories about the land, how every tree, rock, and river had a spirit if one only learned to listen. The children loved her lessons. Even the adults came to respect her. They called her the brave heart of Red Mesa. Tom often visited the school to help fix things or bring supplies. Sometimes he just sat on the porch, listening to the sound of her laughter mixing with the children's. It made him smile in a way he hadn't in years. One evening near sunset, Nayeli and Tom walked by the creek. The air was warm and golden, filled with the smell of mesquite trees. "You remember this place?" Tom asked softly. Nayeli nodded. "Yes," she said. "This was where everything began." Tom took a deep breath. "I'm sorry for that day," he said. "I was afraid, and I didn't understand." She looked at him kindly. "You learned," she said simply. "That's enough." Her words touched him deeply. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come through big speeches, just quiet truth. As months passed, Red Mesa began to change. The townspeople started trading with the nearby Apache camps peacefully. Children from both sides played together at the creek. The fear that once divided them slowly faded, and everyone knew it began with one girl, a girl who had been captured by mistake, but who returned with compassion and courage that changed hearts forever. Years went by, and life moved on. Tom grew older, but he never left Red Mesa. Nayeli became a part of the town's heart, a teacher, a friend, and a living reminder of kindness in a hard land. One spring morning, Tom visited the creek again. The air was soft, the sky clear. He carried a small wooden box with him. Inside was the same feather Nayeli had once left in his hat the night she disappeared. He knelt by the water, smiled quietly, and placed the feather on a flat stone. "Thank you, Nayeli," he whispered, for teaching us what peace means. As the wind rose gently, the feather lifted and drifted away across the shining surface of the creek. Tom watched until it disappeared into the distance. Then he stood up, feeling lighter than he had in years. The story of Nayeli spread far beyond Red Mesa. Travelers passing through heard it from old ranchers, from children at the mission school, from mothers who said, "Let me tell you about the girl who saved a town." And so her memory lived on, not as a tale of fear or capture, but as a story of understanding, forgiveness, and courage. Because sometimes it only takes one kind act, one brave heart, to remind the world that humanity is stronger than fear.